Hey everyone, I hope that you all had a great week this week. I got my big man Maverick with me, my 8-year-old. You want to say hi to anybody in this week's wrap up?
Hi, Halo. And
Who's
Mom.
Halo?
A dog.
Okay, who else?
And Mom.
Who's Mom? No, I'm just kidding.
And Magnum. And Maddie.
Anybody else?
And Major.
Yeah, your brother. What about your rabbit?
And Blue.
And Blue, all right, that's good. You say hi to everybody?
Hi.
All right, good. Always good to have them with me. Always good to family. You all know it. Nothing more important than family. God, country, family. That's what we fight for. That's what we love. So, want to get into the work of this week and what we've been doing in Washington, how that might relate to God, country, and family, these things that we care about. This week in Washington, we worked on some important legislation for our waterways. Very proud to work on that. Some of it really great, some of it not so much. I want to start with the good stuff, then we'll get into the stuff that I said not so much for. The really exciting news of this week is that the House of Representatives, we passed the Water Resources and Development Act. Now this bill, it's a huge part of our ongoing fight for clean water. That's why I couldn't be more excited that it included all of these provisions that I wrote to protect Florida's waterways, to build upon the provisions that we'd passed in previous Water Resources and Development Act. Among them, big wins like accelerating the construction of the EAA reservoir, reducing discharges from Lake Okeechobee, and combating harmful algal blooms, those big things that we've had just that drumbeat of working on year after year. First Amendment, like I said, forces the Army Corps of Engineers to end their bureaucratic delay and actually begin the construction of the EAA Southern Storage Reservoir, something that so many people across Florida have been working on, fighting for so many years. This provision comes after months of back and forth with the Army Corps, who claimed they needed additional authorization to begin construction of this project. Simply, the amendment clarifies that Congress says, no, you don't. Get to work on this, get started on this project as soon as possible. The next one demands that the Army Corps seek to minimize discharges to the estuaries. Very specifically, it tells the Army Corps they have to do that. They have to work to minimize discharges to the estuaries, something they'd never before cared about. They've even talked to us in committee about the fact that they don't care about that, it includes that they have to consider a complete prohibition on discharges from Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie estuary. Huge win for our community. It's something that we're all too familiar with, especially as we think of a hurricane on our horizons. We're very thankful that because of work of the Corps of Engineers and the work of God, that we don't have too much water in Lake Okeechobee right now, where the Corps is thinking they're going to have discharges into our coastal estuaries. That's something that we're very thankful for. So it helps our environment, keeping that fresh water out of our coastal salt estuary and keeping algal blooms out of our coastal estuary as well. The third one that we put in there required the Army Corps of Engineers to coordinate with both federal and state agencies across the board, a number of them, on monitoring algal blooms, forecasting algal blooms, notifying of cyanobacterial levels in Lake Okeechobee when there's those algal blooms to the community before they have discharges of water out of that lake, if they are going to have those discharges. That's important because if the Army Corps is required to work on forecasting an algal bloom, they have to take that into consideration. They have to scratch their head and say, oh, these normally occur at this time of year because of hurricane season, and what do we have to do to prevent sending those algal blooms to other places? It makes them actually think about that problem. Now, this is something that we've been working on, like I said, for years with the EPA, getting the EPA to write a standard for what is too toxic for microcystin. EPA wrote 8 parts per billion. That was something that now we get to go put that forward. Now we're also trying to get the state to adopt that as policy, to say, listen, the state of Florida needs to tell the federal government they are not going to allow them to move toxic water from one place to another. That's something that the Corps has asked that the state be part in adopting that. The Corps, doesn't have a huge desire to go out there and do that. Something I'm going to continue to fight on until we bring it to an end. But that's another avenue to get this to happen, is to get our folks that work in the state, our state representatives, our state senators, our commissioners at all levels, those folks that work within the agencies, to say, whoa, EPA wrote a standard on what is too toxic for microcystin. State of Florida, be responsible. Tell the federal government, we're not going to let you send that from this water body into a completely separate water body into the St. Lucie estuary. Not going to happen any longer. Encourage those people that work at those levels to work on that front. Now, this amendment, it improves public awareness about the health impacts of harmful algal blooms. It also it helps the Army Corps make those better operational decisions to prevent the destruction of the St. Lucie or also of the Caloosahatchee estuary. This is the most basic level of good government, and I'm glad that we're coming together to get this done. Now, on a similar note, let me scratch my eyeball a minute here. On a similar note, I testified before Congress also to prevent your tax dollars from being used to spray toxic chemicals on Florida waterways, i.e., what are we talking about here? We're talking about that spraying that goes on to kill invasive plant species. Now, as you know, we've been working tirelessly as a community to clean up our waterways on a host of different fronts, restore the Everglades, spending billions of dollars to achieve that very goal, while at the same time we have helicopters and airboats commissioned by the government to continue dumping toxic chemicals into those same waterways that we're fighting so hard to clean up. If you've ever read the labels on some of those chemicals, you know that it tells you specifically, listen, wear rubber gloves, wear an apron, don't ingest this whatsoever. If you get it in your eyes, you're going to go blind. It tells you all these different things about it, and it's being dumped in our waterways. Absolutely, the concentrations of these chemicals matter, but it's something that we all need to look at that and say, is there a better way that we can do this? And I absolutely believe that there is. In other words, we're undermining our own restoration efforts and wasting taxpayer money while endangering our health. You all have heard me say it a million times. If I wouldn't put it in the bathtub with one of my children, my son Maverick, who is just standing here, or my son Magnum, or my daughter Madeline, or my other son Major, if I wouldn't put it in the bathtub with one of my kids, we got to fight to keep it out of our waterways. It's just that simple, that much common sense. It's counterproductive to manage invasive species in a way that poisons our waterways. So I'm confident that these provisions, along with a number of others that we've secured in this bill, they're going to make a real difference in our community. And we keep chipping away at it and chipping away at it, one step at a time. You can learn more about these wins if you want to. We always put them up on our website, mass.house.gov/WRDA, that's WRDA, that stands for Water Resources and Development Act. So you can find more about those on that if you want to. Now, I want to shift gears here to some of the disappointing news of the week. As you know, we've been leading the charge for Everglades restoration. Talked about that already, along with all of you in the community that have been fighting on this for so many years. The completion of critical infrastructure projects like the EAA reservoir that help us accomplish that goal. That's why I'm so frustrated that this week, Speaker Pelosi, she lumped this critical funding for projects like that into a piece of legislation with so many unrelated poison pills that it's going to need substantial change before it has any chance of being signed into law. Let's talk about that for a moment and what Speaker Pelosi attached Everglades funding and these things to and how they all got connected. Legislation limits funding for any projects that aim to secure our southern border. So we have water infrastructure projects attached to not allowing our country, the United States of America, to put the United States of America first and protect our border in this time that, yes, always we're trying to protect against human trafficking and other things, but it's pretty important in this time of coronavirus to also make sure we don't have folks coming in that we're unaware about from different places. Also provides $15 million. May not seem like the biggest amount of money in terms of the dollar amounts that Congress is throwing around lately, talking about $3 trillion, $2 trillion, $1 trillion. $15 million doesn't seem like that much. It's a lot of money to me. I'm assuming it's a lot of money to all of you, but it's $15 million that's being used to use for the legal fees of illegal immigrants. That's just not a good use of your tax dollars. Speaking of I'll talk about it because I was doing the math on it a little bit earlier. When you hear that number of $3 trillion thrown around for coronavirus, let's do some quick math on that. If we've got 320 million Americans and you have $3 trillion, that would literally be about $9,000 for every single American. And I can guarantee you that the way that $3 trillion is being proposed for coronavirus, it's not giving each one of you and your spouses and your children a $9,000 check. And so just a quick aside as we think about what's going on in those conversations about coronavirus and COVID-19 funding. Let me get back on track here, though. It's an aside. So the bill takes that I was just talking about. The bill takes a dangerous step towards defunding the police, specifically including prohibiting funding for drug enforcement task forces. Not going to allow that any longer. The bill also allows for taxpayer-funded abortion, sending taxpayer dollars to organizations like Planned Parenthood. It's not a place for anybody's taxpayer dollars to go. Regardless of whether you support these provisions or don't support these provisions, I'll reiterate again, the reality is that this bill, it's not going to go forward. It's not going to be able to pass the Senate or be signed into law with these provisions attached to it. That's why it frustrates me. These partisan riders, they make it so difficult for us to get bipartisan work done like Everglades restoration and get that funding done when we want to get it done. So we need to work together, work bipartisanly, write these funds into getting them done for the Everglades. We need to be doing it now, not when our backs are against the wall before those deadlines come to fruition. So in that, I want to move on to this. We got to ask Speaker Pelosi, stop. Here's what's going on. Stop sending all of the members of Congress home back to their districts, which is what's going on right now, so that herself and one or two others can sit down and try to talk about everything, to a majority and a minority leader in the House and a majority and a minority leader in the Senate, and just the four of them talk about things and not include everybody else that you would call rank and file in the House and rank and file in the Senate to work out these issues of major policy, because that's what's happening. It's not right. It diminishes every single area of our country, and it gets to bad legislation. So it's in that I just want to say, as always, it is an honor to represent each and every one of you as your representative in the House of Representatives. I look forward to seeing you all around town. I also look forward to Speaker Pelosi having this body work with the kind of perseverance that you all deserve, that you deserve from your elected officials. There's nothing that ticks me off more than her sending us home when there's very serious work to be done. Drives me crazy. You all have heard me rant about that before. But in that, I look forward to seeing you all around. Talk to you all later. Y'all take care.